on the western coast of Sweden, to the north of Marstrand, and about 3 miles from the Paternoster rocks, well known as the scene of many a fatal shipwreck, lies a little group of barren islands. One only is inhabited, which, in the following narration, we shall call Tistelön. This desolate spot is nearly bare of vegetation, and the few shrubs and plants here and there visible look dry and withered, all nature amongst those masses of stone presenting only one uniform aspect of dreary sterility. The western shore of the island consists entirely of a range of grey rocks, between the openings of which the ocean, in almost constant agitation, dashes its foaming waters. The stones that cover the beach, rolled for centuries to and fro by the restless billows, are for the most part rounded. Even in the rocks themselves circular holes have been formed, through which the waters forever pour, and then rushing back, unite their sullen, monotonous sound with the dismal scream of the seabirds when they uplift their death cry over the human bones which, mingled with the pieces of wreck, lie scattered on the shore, or announce to the experienced ear of the solitary fisherman their anticipation of an approaching shipwreck. At the time our story commences, there stood on the eastern shore of the island, partly sheltered from the violence of the westerly gales by some neighboring rocks, a small, half-ruinous dwelling, the exterior of which first demands our attention. A gable appeared to have been recently added to the house, its white timber and fresh moss presenting a striking contrast to the unsightly walls of the old part of the dwelling, discolored by fish drying and the action of salt water. The windows were little better than holes, with 2 panes of glass, one above the other, and between each such aperture raw sealskins were stretched from the roof down to the stone foundation. The courtyard consisted of a large shelf of flat rock. At one corner of it were several poles from which strings of skate hung in regular rows, and every point of rock near the house was also covered with ling and split cod. About the middle of the flat space, in a crevice of the rock, a mast was inserted, on the top of which a tin weathercock turned in the wind with an uneasy creaking sound. A savage watchdog was in general posted at the farthest corner of the yard, with his nose turned toward the sea. And if we add to the picture an ill-conditioned cat feasting on the remains of bait in a lobster pot, the reader will have a tolerably correct idea of the scene we have attempted to describe. A thick mist rested on the barren spot. The waves beat upon the naked rocks with a dull, heavy sound, and the seabirds were hurrying with shrill cries to their concealed resting places. The day was drawing to a close. The sun's last rays had sunk into the ocean, and twilight had begun to spread shadows over Tistelön. But in the house we have described glimmered the pale light of an oil lamp. From the wide entrance, in which hung several wet nets and a number of fishing lines, a door led to the room inhabited by the male members of the family. It was large, empty, and blackened with smoke, and bore evident marks of the rude habits of its inmates, an impression which was confirmed by the appearance of the chief personage in the group that at present occupied it. A broad-shouldered man, rather under the middle size and about 50 years of age, was seated at one end of a heavy oak table upon a large block of wood, painted green, which, by the marks of iron rings still visible, had evidently been part of a mast. His face was bronzed and weather-beaten, and his grey hair thickly matted, his whiskers coarse and bushy, much resembling the seaweed with which they were often in contact, drew to a point beneath the projecting chin from which depended a long, shaggy beard. His dress was a coarse woolen jacket with breeches of sea-green cotton velvet of considerable width and terminating at the knee, where they were met by rough sealskin boots. Every movement of this son of the ocean displayed great physical strength, and his sharp gray eyes, as they contemplated with satisfaction a rifle he was engaged in cleaning, had an expression which, if it did not absolutely betoken a strong mind, was at least that of a resolute and daring character. Opposite this man, who represented the head of the family, sat his eldest son, Birger, a giant, who might have been a fitting boon companion for Rolf Krake. His features had a fine, manly expression, but the contemptuous curl of the lip and something wild and misanthropical in the restless eye gave reason to suspect that midnight darkness brooded over his soul. Birger Haraldsson, attired in sailcloth trousers and with the sleeves of his blue striped shirt turned up to the shoulders, leaned carelessly on his firelock, while occupied in sharpening flints, trying them at times against his nail. But as strong contrasts are to be found in every situation in life, they were not wanting here. Beside the elder man sat his youngest son, Birger's half-brother, a fair, delicate boy of 12 or 13, in whose pale countenance and dark eyes listless melancholy was the prevailing expression. The boy seemed, at first sight, by what might be considered a strange error of nature, to have had his lot cast where it was manifestly impossible his feeble powers could ever develop themselves. At the present moment, the dexterity with which he twisted a fishing line showed that he was accustomed to the work, while at the same time he listened with timid anxiety to the conversation between his father and brother, who, on their part, paid no attention to his presence. "Well, what more news do you hear?" asked the elder Haraldsson. "Well, if what I heard comes to pass, you will not think so much of your bargain there," answered Birger with a significant smile, and casting a glance to the farthest corner of the room, where a number of packages, large and small, were covered by some loose sails. "Ah, an old fox is not so easily trapped, but you took up the goods too soon. Hark! Is that Passup's bark? Look out, Anton, if you see anything on the water." The boy quickly obeyed, but returned with the assurance that the noise was only the wind whistling round the corners of the house. "Good. We shall have a gale tonight. I just wish there may be such a storm as will send the revenue boat into harbor again, in case she ventures out. But you've not told me the rest yet, Birger. What said the Instö packet?" "Well, if you must know, Halvor Romundsson said to me, 'Birger, have you had any dealings yet with the new lieutenant? They say he's a bold hand, has sharper ears than the devil's grandmother, and that he has sworn never to sleep on shore till he has fished up the sharks from Tistelön. Aye, aye, if he once gets hold of them, they will be in luck if they get off with a whole skin.'" "The crab swells till it bursts with pure envy," said Haraldsson contemptuously. "Let him beware the sharks of Tistelön. They could swallow him at a mouthful. I'll wager it was that same poltroon that put the lieutenant on the scent. But wait a while, my boy. You don't know what Håkan Haraldsson's made of. The great fishes always eat up the little ones. While you're laying your nets, he plays with you, but he can jump out of them when he likes." "Once, twice, 3 times, perhaps," said Birger, laughing. "But the fourth he may be held fast." No, I tell you, I've followed the trade these 20 years. I understand it. And when I grow old and useless and fit for nothing but to keep watch at home, then, Birger, you will stand to the guns." "Well, we shall see. That no one can tell." Birger's restless eyes were now fixed on the door, which opened on a flight of stairs leading to the new part of the house before mentioned. A slight noise was heard without. "It is the little one," said Haraldsson, as his harsh features lightened with a look of affection. "It is Erika," murmured Birger, and by a quick movement he turned to the other side of the room. A moment after, the door opened, and a young woman, rather above 20, of a pleasing but grave appearance, entered the room, leading by the hand a girl about 7 years old. The child, who looked like some beautiful vision from the abode of angels, ran forward, jumped upon the old man's knee, and clasped her little white arms round his neck, saying sweetly, "Good night, Papa. Erika will have me go to bed already. Little naughty Erika." "You are going out again tonight, I hear," said the young woman, in a reproachful tone, turning to Haraldsson as she spoke. "I have some business on hand," answered he carelessly, as he gazed with sparkling eyes on his darling child, the little Gabriella, who played with his long beard and laid her soft, delicate cheek to her father's hard brown face. He kissed her and stroked her glossy curls with his rough hand, and then placed her on the floor carefully, as if afraid of hurting her. "I really wish, Mamsell Erika," resumed he with gratified pride, "that my wife were alive now. It would have done her heart good to see this child. I'm bold to say it would not be easy to find her match. It would have made amends to Britta-Lisa for many grievances." "I think the contrary," answered Erika in a severe tone. "It would have caused her double suffering, both grief for the present and fear for the future." "Yes, perhaps, after she'd learned from you to be high and mighty, both in mind and speech. But as the proverb says, power gives courage. Mamsell Erika should remember that the gnat hums round the candle till it burns itself. She did not tune her pipes so high 3 years ago." "Let Mamsell Erika alone, father," said Birgir sternly. "What would become of the child without her?" Haraldsson, who saw in his son the counterpart of himself in his youth, did not care to rouse the hot blood. He therefore wisely let his own cool, and said, in rather a conciliating tone, that he meant no offence. "But you look so cross at Erika, Papa," said Gabriella. "Why did you do that?" Erika was perfectly calm. She knew how she was situated in regard to those with whom she lived, and that firmness and self-possession alone procured for her the respect due to a woman compelled, as she was by extraordinary circumstances, to remain in such society. "Say good night, dear Gabriella. It's time to go to bed," she said gently. Gabriella obediently kissed her father, then nodded to Birgir, but flew into Anton's arms with a bound. "Must you go on the sea too, in the dark, Anton?" "Well, not if I can help it. I would much rather stay at home," answered the boy with a sigh. "Well, then, do stay at home," said Gabriella, who, accustomed to have her own way, thought it proper that Anton should have the same. "Ask my father. He knows if I can." "Let him stay at home, Papa," exclaimed Gabriella. "You see, I want him so much tomorrow morning early to help me to gather cockles." "No, my darling, he must not stay at home. When he comes back tomorrow, he will help you. Tonight he must go to sea and learn his trade. He must not be always a milksop, sitting warm by the stove, while his father and brother work hard. But go you to bed, my sugar plum. You will, perhaps, have Anton back before daybreak." It so rarely happened that the idolized Gabriella was denied anything she chose to ask, that a few tears of sorrow and vexation dropped upon her soft cheek. But she said nothing, for "the powder was good," her father would have said, could he have seen into the soul of his child, which already possessed no small portion of resolution. Erika was always silent when she was offended, and Erika was Gabriella's model in all things, which she strove to copy as far as her childish powers permitted. The room to which Gabriella and her guardian retired occupied the principal part of the new building, and was in all respects entirely different from the gloomy apartment on the ground floor. Besides being provided with tolerably large windows, it was richly, even elegantly furnished, although each article appeared to have come from a different quarter. Curtains of the finest muslin, tastefully arranged, fell in wavy folds upon the Turkish carpet, which, however, was not exactly in keeping with the cabin chairs and stools of various shapes, roughly made of coarse mahogany and with horsehair cushions. The most beautiful Persian tapestry covered the walls, in some places interspersed with flags of various nations and pieces of silk. At each joining were mirrors or pictures of different sizes. The last, which were numerous, represented vessels of every construction. The whole might have been aptly compared to a gallery of portraits of deceased personages, and when the bold pirate visited his daughter's room, perhaps there started from the finely modeled hulls and delicate cordage recollections which, like avenging spirits, came to give warning of future retribution. In fact, the whole furniture of the apartment too much resembled the spoils of plundered vessels, the more so that amongst the smaller articles might be observed a case, which had once contained a compass, and was now Gabriella's exclusive property. Although of rough manufacture, this case was filled with strings of costly pearls, besides other trinkets of great value, and was therefore committed to the care of Erika. Between the windows of this room, in which was collected everything that a doting father could devise for the pleasure and amusement of his child, upon a large mahogany sideboard stood a lamp of finely wrought silver. The clear flame threw a softened light upon the heavy embroidered curtains surrounding the bed of rough oak to which Gabriella was now consigned. "Will you not go to bed too, Erika?" asked the little girl. "You sit up so often at night now." "I will finish making your doll's frock, Ella," answered Rika, as she began to turn over some splendid scraps of silk. "Oh, let me sit up in my bed and look at you, dear Rika. You work for the doll every night, and yet she's never dressed." "She will be quite ready this evening, but I cannot allow you to sit up and look at my work. It would spoil your pleasure when it's all finished. Lie down quietly, and I will tell you something pretty." "But I've not said my prayers yet, Rika." "True, they must not be forgotten," said Erika, and a faint blush tinged her cheek at the thought that anything merely affecting herself should have made her fail in her duty to her charge. "Say your evening prayer, dear Ella, and then pray to God for your father and your brothers." "Oh, but Birgit is so disagreeable. I don't think I'll pray for him." "You should pray for all your fellow creatures, Ella, and for your own relations in particular. Birgit is your brother." "Yes, but he's cross for all that. Do you pray for him, Rika?" "Oh, yes, Ella. More for him than for Anton. Anton's mild and gentle and harms no one. Birgit, with his unruly temper, stands in need of many prayers." Gabriella repeated her usual prayer, in which even Birgit was included, for Erika's sake, and then sweetly fell asleep to the half-whispered narration of the enchanted swans of Tistelön, of which these sagas relate such wonderful and delightful things.